Good afternoon. This is the presentation about transformations. It's kind of an introduction to geometry. And what he tries to do, Mr. Patterson, he's the one that developed the curriculum, is we start with trying to talk to you about some things that we did in algebra so that maybe you can relate them to geometry. Okay, so we're going to talk about transformations as functions, as if, kind of compare them to algebraic functions, and how you take points of a shape and you can move them to to new locations by giving input and some outputs. And let's give it a try. Okay, so in algebra we talk about functions. And when we say we can input some numbers, like if you have 2x plus 1, we input a 1 for x, and what does it spit out? What does y equal? So you have functions, you have inputs and outputs. In geometry, you have transformations. And you start with endpoints are your input is points. And they could be on the coordinate plane, like if you have a point that's like 1, 1. And then your output is, if I do something to it and I move it, where did that point go? Or if I have a circle, if I move it, where does it go now? Okay, this is what we talk about in Algebra 1. We go, okay, our input's -1. Here's our function. Put -1 in for x, and it spits out 4. Do you guys remember that? We have this little function notation. Put in the -1 for x. So you say the function, if you put in a -1, the output is 4. I don't know if you guys remember that, but he's hoping that you can recall that so that now he's going to try to help that explain part of geometry. So in geometry, we're talking about how shapes are altered or moved. Okay, and you're going to see something like this. This is called a coordinate rule. And this is going to be our input on this side, and then we're going to have this arrow that goes, and it's going to tell you the output. Okay, we call this a pre-image. In other words, the circle I started with, and maybe the circle, the image is where I landed. Okay, if you were going to see this, how you would translate that in English is you could say the coordinate rule T. It gets it from this capital T here. Remember, functions are usually, they have names too, like f of g, f of h. Well, this is in geometry, this is the coordinate rule T, and it maps, it gets that from this big arrow here, it maps all of the points, x and y. So if I'm just dealing with one point, that's fine, but if I have a circle that's made up of a whole bunch of points, it's saying you're going to take all the points on that circle and you're going to move them to a new location, and this is the rule that you're going to use to move them and where they're going to be. So for this one, I'm just going to go over it again. The name of the rule is the letter in front of the x and the y. So this one, the coordinate rule is T. X and y says all the points will be affected by this rule. The little arrow stands for maps or moves. The x plus 3, y minus 6 is the change produced by the movement. Let's look. Okay, if you are given the coordinate rule, txy, x plus 3 gets mapped to x plus 3, y minus 6. If your pre-image is the point, -1, 5, that means you're going to put it in the coordinate rule. You're going to put -1 plus 3, and you're going to get a 2. And the 5 here, you're going to put that in for y, and you get 5 minus 6 is -1. So you have just moved that point, or the pre-image, from -1, 5, and now it just got moved over to 2, -1. And like I said, when we talk about geometry, we're moving things, how we move shapes and objects. And this is one way of being able to do that. Okay, here's another one. This is also a coordinate rule T, saying that all the points x and y are going to get mapped to x plus 3, y minus 6. So if I have this time determine the pre-image if the image is C, this time I'm telling you where I landed, okay, where that point landed, and you have to tell me where did I start from. So on this one, you're going to have to go back to algebra a little bit, and you're going to say, okay, well, if x plus 3, it's going to equal 3, and you're going to solve for x. X started at 0, because if I subtract 3 from both sides, x is equal to 0. That means if my x was a 0 and I followed this rule, 0 plus 3, I would land at 3. Does that make sense? Okay, if I know y minus 6 is the rule and I landed on 2, I want to know where I started from though. So I'm going to put this equal to 2, and I'm going to solve for y by adding 6 to both sides, and I get y equals 8. That means if I started with 8 and I followed the rule and I said 8 minus 6, I'm going to land on 2. Okay, so that kind of tells you how to go forward or how to go backwards, and you have to know the pre-image and the image. Okay, so I gave you a video that kind of walks through some of the basic concepts. Mr. Patterson, who's the one that developed the curriculum, also has a short video on it, and you can watch that one as well. And I think you should be able to do that first worksheet. It's pretty simple, and it's basically just trying to help you make the connection between algebra and geometry. Okay?